Hello and welcome to this edition of On Air. This is the online version of the Swiss AI Weeks that ran the whole September and will come to an end tomorrow in collaboration with Wildcard Media. Today, we do the Power Workshop 3 AI Reality Check, Health Tech Use, Misuse, Sandboxed but Exposed, the Myth of Safe Testing by Dietmar Schafarzik. And you have the possibility to ask questions in the chat, and Nico will moderate them, and there will be a Q&A session at the end. So I wish you very insightful 45 minutes. Over to you, Dietmar.
Okay, so thank you for the introduction. I try to share my screen. 1 second. So I need a yes if you can see my screen.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, so welcome everybody to the third and last part of our mini-series, decoding software as medical device and AI functionalities. And today's talk is entitled The Myth of Safe Testing. My name is Dietmar Schafarzik. I am still a serial entrepreneur in medtech. I am a lecturer at ETH Zurich at the Department of Medicine. I'm the regulatory expert of the ETH. In addition, I'm a diploma lead auditor for quality management systems and a lead technical assessor. And together with me is Nico Mangold joining this session. Nico is the founder and managing director at Mangold's MedTech Consultant. He's also a technical assessor, and he is the expert in digital health, software as medical device, and AI as medical device. And he will take care about your questions. You will see and hear this a little bit, I'm a little bit influenced, and the focus is on flu. So I am a little bit sick today. And so I really want to start and try to unpack together with you the principles of regulatory sandboxes. This is our topic of today. And as always, we start with a real life case. So imagine a Berlin-based startup developed an artificial intelligence for cardiac diagnosis. In internal trials, it outperforms human cardiologists, but without CE certification and reimbursement, it's invisible to the system. It is invisible not because it doesn't work, but because the system won't allow it to exist, because it has no CE mark, no clinical evidence, no reimbursement. And so this algorithm, although very, very precise in the output and in the results, wasn't allowed to diagnose the patient. And the question is that we have to answer, how do we let innovation breathe without putting patients at risk? And this is where the puzzle of sandboxes try to solve these questions. And the question is, what is a regulatory sandbox? And of course, it's not a loophole. It is a test kitchen for brave ideas. It is a safe space for uncertainty, yeah? But always remember, a regulatory sandbox must be in a controlled regulatory environment for live testing, because you are playing around, yeah, with patients. And so the sandbox is always in the environment of regulatory and competent authorities. You always have to remember that a sandbox must be time limited, must be monitored, and it is built for high potential but unclear cases. And this brings us to the question why sandboxes exist. And sandboxes exist because regulation can't always keep up with innovation. This is very, very clear, I think, for everyone. If you think about artificial intelligence, digital twins, adaptive software, this is too fast and too much movement for static rules and regulations. And often this kind of health tech products have an unclear risk category, and so evidence must be generated, but it is unclear where and how. And so we see here that regulatory frameworks are powerful but slow. You always have to remember regulatory is written for the past. Once a technology is so well known and so often tested, then you can write an ISO standard about it. But if you think about future innovations, about future technologies, and innovation at itself, this is not tested enough. It's not prescribed in detail in a lot of publications, because if it would be, then it would not be innovation any longer. And the gap is growing, and this is why competent authorities tried to find an answer to these questions and tried to find the principles of regulatory sandboxes. And of course, every region has its own vision, its own principles. And I only want to highlight 6 of them. The principle of regulatory sandboxes is known in the UK, it's known in Singapore. The EMA follows this kind of principle. Swissmedic is planning for a pilot study or a pilot sandbox. In Germany, you all may know the DIGA principle, and the DIGA principle is also a kind of a sandbox that already meets reimbursement. And in the USA, the pre-cert pathway is known and can be compared to this kind of sandbox principles. And so sandboxes reflect the regulatory personality of their region. And you have to understand the culture, and then you will understand the sandbox. And as I have said, the sandbox is always placed in the environment of rules and regulations and the competent authority. So it is a must to know a little bit the regulatory environment of the different regions to plan and execute a sandbox successfully. One short question to the DIGA, the digital Gesundheitsapplication, digital health application, as a kind of a sandbox with prescriptions, as we have entitled this. And the DIGA is the only sandbox with a health insurance card. And so this DIGA principle is where the legal manufacturer, but also the health insurance agencies and the competent authorities are sitting in the same boat and are taking together the risk. And the DIGA fast track is reduced of 1 year only. It is a 1 year evidence window, but it is also reimbursed in this time. And so the DIGA is a very, very specific thing in this regulatory sandbox context. The question is, are there strategic benefits with the principle of regulatory sandboxes? And this is clear, yes, because innovation gets de-risked. And the answer is very, very easy to give. Who gains from the sandbox? Of course, the innovators, the regulators, the investors, and all for the benefit of the patient. And so I think the strategic benefit of a regulatory sandbox is very, very clear. And this leads us to a little bit of problem. Everyone who thinks he is a little bit a kind of a modern concept, or who has developed a software as medical device wants to play in the sandbox. But in a sandbox, no tourists are allowed, only pioneers. And so please always have in mind this kind of a short checklist. It must be absolute novel technology, no Me Too products. There must be an absence of a clear classification pathway. There must be a working principle. There must be a risk assessment and a risk management in plan. And of course, and the ethical committees must be respected. And the most important thing, a lot of startups or also research groups forget about it. you have to have defined goals that you want to achieve with the time or during the time you are in the sandbox, and you have to have a clearly defined exit strategy for your sandbox before starting the sandbox. And so in a very, very lay person answer, you can say the sandbox isn't for skipping steps, it's for proving you understand the steps that matter. And please always remind, you have to predefine your goals. What kind of results do you want to achieve in the time when you are in the sandbox? And you have to present the competent authorities a clear exit strategy. Absolutely a must. And in addition, you must be really novel technology. You must have your quality management system in place and implemented, including risk assessment and risk management. And there must be an uncertainty in the risk classification of your device. And so there is a kind of a sandbox survival guide. Of course, some clearly do's and don'ts. And the do's, I think, are very, very clear. Transparency builds trust. Laziness builds walls. And the do's are treat documentation like it is a kind of a dry run for your CE certification. You must be in a regulatory environment. You must have your quality management system in place. Share all the learnings with the regulators, with the competent authorities, and build very, very early a monitoring framework and a user feedback system. This is absolutely mandatory that you are really on the users, that you really know how your product performs in this sandbox. And so it is very, very clear what are the don'ts. Don't expect a certification shortcut. It's not a certification shortcut. It's only observation, not certification. Don't bypass ethics or data protection. And very, very important, don't forget your exit plan from the very, very first beginning. And so, of course, there is, because this regulatory sandbox is not a kind of a bypass, it is very, very clear that there are also some limitations. And as I have shown to you, there are different principles of regulatory sandboxes in the different regions. And so sandboxes are limited to national programs. Very, very important to know. A sandbox success does not mean this is a market approval, not at all. Not all products are suited in a sandbox, and of course you need internal maturity. As I have said, you must have your quality management system in place. You must have the framework of the technical documentation in place. You must have a functioning risk management working, and you must be able to have really a version control, a versioning for your product in the sandbox, because all the learnings from the sandbox you have to feed back in your design and development work. And so versioning is a must. From sandbox to strategy. Align sandbox learning with ISO 13485, 14971, 62366. Use all the data in your clinical evaluation report, because all the results and findings from your sandbox activities must be directly linked to the clinical evaluation reports. And so this is very, very, very important for all of you, that you are already familiar with the usual suspects, the ISO standards and the medical device regulation. And so the sandbox is not the goal. The sandbox is your gym. Use it to build strengths and confidence for your company and for your product. Exit with data documentation and a clear direction. That's why I said you have to define what you want to achieve, what kind of results you want to have at the end, and you must be absolutely transparent in the documentation if you want to use these results gained in the sandbox later on for the certification documentation. And so bring it home, bring the results home and use it. Train hard, learn fast, and exit with clarity. And now I come as also in the last two parts, to the homework for you. You know, if we have prepared for you a kind of a small homework, and if you answer all the three little homeworks to us, you get a certificate for this small series of workshops, software as medical device and AI. I want to present you the question of a regulatory sandbox that we are preparing at ETH at the moment. The use case is, you all know, non-CE certified smartwatches and fitness trackers. And we want to use this non-CE certified smartwatches and fitness trackers in clinical anamnesis, combined with patient-reported outcome measures for a kind of a second opinion support. Because ask a patient, how much distance do you walk every day? Hey, he says, oh, I do not walk so much, maybe 2,000 steps. And if you look at the fitness tracker, there is a complete other picture. Or someone says, oh, I'm walking really a lot every day. And you look at the fitness tracker and there's another picture. Or if you ask them, how do you sleep, you will get the different answers. So we said it could make sense to use non-CE certified smartwatches for clinical anamnesis. And why is this a sandbox use case? Because you have here the criteria matrix that you have to apply. The technology is novel or disruptive. There is no clear regulatory pathway, uncertainty about safety and impact, potential benefit for patient care, and need for real-world testing. And so the question is, does this criteria apply to this case of the non-CE marked smartwatches and fitness trackers for clinical anamnesis? And you see, we thought a 5-time yes. The technology is novel because we are repurposing customer-grade devices for semi-clinical use. There is absolutely no clear regulatory pathway. In contrary, normally it would be forbidden to use this kind of products in a clinical context. You have some uncertainty about safety and impact, but you will have a great potential benefit for patient care because you can limit the bias in the patient-reported outcome measures. And so you see, this can be a case for a regulatory sandbox. And a kind of a question like this we have prepared for you and your homework. And the regulatory tension zones in this case is clear. The non-CE marked smartwatches are clearly non-medical devices, but they will have indirect diagnostic relevance. Notified bodies, for the moment, won't sign off the use of non-CE marked smartwatches in the clinical use. And of course, you have some ethical consideration. This is why we think a regulatory sandbox for this case is the right approach. And as I have said, you have to define the objectives. What do you want to learn during your sandbox activities? So this we also have done here. We want to learn, does it assess, or we want to assess the influence of wearable data on patient-reported outcome measures, yeah, to prove or disprove bias reduction. We want to understand the risk of false reassurance or panic. We want to evaluate correlation quality. We want to develop patient information and consent standards. And maybe we want to build evidence for future CE justification. So we start the sandbox with a clear goal and clear goals in our mind. And of course, the suggested setup for this kind of regulatory sandbox, you have to use ethically approved study protocols. You have to include multiple device brands. You have to collect the patient-reported outcome measures. You have to predefine your endpoints, and you have to really collaborate with regulatories, competent authorities, ethical committee, clinical partner, and also we have invited healthcare insurances. And so I think we have a nice case here, and you get a little bit an understanding how to approach this kind of sandbox principles. And of course, no game, no fun, no risk. There's always a risk, and how sandboxes could mitigate them. This I have tried to visualize in this table. Of course, it can be the risk that you have unvalidated data, and that leads to wrong interpretation. Of course, patient misunderstanding of device purpose. Of course, insurer or doctor over reliance on smartwatch data. And so we can use the sandbox to mitigate these risks, because we are within a controlled environment. We have enhanced informed consent for the patient, and we have controlled feedback channels for the health care professionals using this non-CE marked medical devices. And so also here you can see a kind of an approach how to address risk and risk mitigation. And so the strategic impact, I think, is very, very clear. There's an impact for science. We can validate or dismiss consumer-grade data integration, which is always a big, big question. Can we use smartwatch data in clinical application? We maybe are able to define future medical device regulation boundaries, so we may influence regulation. We can position ourselves in another way, but in an evidence-based way on the market, and we can contribute to working or to see patient-reported outcome measures in a little bit another way, or make it a little bit more objective. A patient-reported outcome measure is always a very, very subjective information. Here again, possible sandboxes and hosts for this kind of use case. We could apply for Germany. Switzerland has a kind of a pilot running. UK would also fit, and Singapore. And as ETH is located in Switzerland and Singapore, we start this sandbox in Switzerland and Singapore. And so I come to the end with my, for those who have joined us the last 2 times also, with my last slides, and I strongly advise you, don't be afraid of medical device regulation in France, although, or especially if you want to start sandbox activities, because sandbox activities must be in a regulatory controlled and monitored environment. You have the competent authorities as a partner on the board, and so it is very, very useful that you know the medical device regulation and the various ISO standards and norms. Always think, and that's the case here also, regulatory compliance is your seat belt, because it prevents the crash landing of your product or the unsuccess and the results that you are not allowed to use if you plan your sandbox not in the right way from the very, very first beginning. Please, for all of you who want to get the certificate initiated by us for this small series of workshop, scan this QR code. There is your homework. It is a short task for you to solve about setting up a regulatory sandbox. So please use the QR code. Here is the QR code if you have any questions, or if we can help you in your planning, in your certification pathway for your devices. Please scan this QR code and get in contact with us, with me, or Nico. I have written a smart booklet, a smart reader. It's called The Evolution of Regulation, a story written in clinical failures. If you want to have this, send me an email with the big QR code, and or follow me on LinkedIn and stay in contact. So thank you very, very much that you have been here today for our last session, and I stop sharing my screen and give back maybe to Nico.
Thank you, Dietmar. So This time or in this workshop, we haven't had too many questions in the chat. We had one good point from Naureen that it's, in the case you presented, of course, a little bit challenging because in your case with the wearables, of course, the patients are wearing the watch or using their phone 24/7. I think that's a good point. And of course, as in all studies, you need to take those shortcomings into account and of course then take that into account in your evaluation. Else, we haven't had any more questions, at least not in the chat. Feel free to now.
One second, Nico, only to explain this. The use of the non-CE certified products, smartwatch, fitness tracker, or iPhone is only as a kind of a second opinion for the patient-reported outcome measures, because sometimes these are so subjective. And so if you also can see the data on the devices, it makes a subjective opinion a little bit more objective.
Exactly. So we had one more question by Joey. Dietmar, could you quickly share again your slides? He wants to see the slide about risks and how Sandbox mitigates them. And Naureen asks if we can get access to the slides themselves.
If you
actually the slide before, I think it had the kind of summary of steps.
Sorry?
1 second, I try to share and you say stop.
And to Naureen, you can watch the full video on YouTube again. If you really need the slides, contact us on LinkedIn or just write a quick email, then we can provide you with them.
I'll send you a message on LinkedIn. I just
Perfect.
prefer the slides because they're very interesting and I want to be able to stare at them. Thank you.
Perfect. Sure.
That was quite fast.
So please also shoot us an email. That could be the best thing. I'm really willing to give you these slides if you get in contact with Nico or with me. So there is nothing to hide away. You really can have this, and then you can study this in detail. But always remember, this is just an overview and not a complete regulatory compliant advice. Yeah, it's a kind of an overview. So this is my legal disclaimer.
Perfect.
Yes.
So are there any open questions, anything to add from your side?
I guess I could ask a question, Nico, if you want.
Sure.
Okay, so first of all, it's been such an amazing experience being in your course. I just want to know, one of the things I've been curious about with this, these wearables, there's so many types of wearables today. And in the data is, like you said, it's not like clinical, so you can't draw, you're just taking it as like a secondary option to just understand when, someone is saying, I've walked a lot, but it's saying on their wearable, they've walked like 500 steps,
Yes.
Anyway, long story short, one thing I've been curious about is now that there's so many types of wearables, is there, if let's say, for example, you're building something and you want to give recommendations to people of potential wearables, is there also like regulation on how you can communicate that? Otherwise, will it also be seen as giving medical recommendation?
No, there is just I answer and then maybe Nico also gives his insight. I answer from the view of this use case right now. Yeah, so we use this non-CE marked smartwatches and fitness trackers for a clinical study with a clear indication and closing in of patients. It is a study about obesity. yeah, where you really have to know how many steps does a patient walk or whatever, and so it is a really clear focus, yeah, not for every teeny tiny indication. It's a clear study about obesity. It is to make the patient reported outcome that is very, very subjective, as you also have said it in your question, to make it a little bit more objective, to have a second opinion, to exclude potential bias, something like this. And of course, we do not recommend.
Hello.
We do not recommend different brands of smartwatches and fitness trackers, but of course we made a kind of a benchmark overview or a competitor's overview, and we focused on some user data. Yeah, every manufacturer of this kind of smartwatch has a homepage where the user says, wow, accurate measuring, or wow, it does not work at all, the height measurement, I was on the mountain, blah blah blah, and it showed me 400 meters, and so we have a kind of a triage of the devices, and this is then also a little bit a part of a soft inclusion criteria, where we ask what kind of smartwatch or wearable do you use. But honestly, there are a little bit the three usual suspects that I do not name, that most people use. I hope I could answer a little bit this question.
Yeah, just an insight also from my side. If we step back from this study scenario and go to like a medical device field, for example, and if you then want to recommend a specific watch to work with your AI or your medical device in general, then of course you need to take care that your recommendations are based on data, and maybe you have some kind of validation. But as Dietmar said, there's no specific regulation on wearables. But of course, if you're working in the medical device field, the medical device regulation will then come into place.
And I would really recommend, or something like this, that you work with a kind of a matrix, where you make a short assessment of the different devices, pros and cons, risks, accuracy, performance, something like this, that you also can show at the end, if you are working in this kind of a regulatory sandbox, to the competent authorities why you have excluded some devices.
Thank you. I mean, can I do a follow-up quick question on it? Just one of the thoughts that I had is that exactly, because I'm also thinking about this idea, what I'm building is supposed to be non-clinical, but, and I'm seeing a lot of people's trend on, if they're interested in longevity and so forth, they're overtly assessing their data. Right? Like one of my concerns from an AI safety point is that people are getting too attached to these metrics. Like if someone already has a disposition towards addictions like anorexia and whatever, and now they have data to get them even more obsessed with every inch of their body. And so that's the reason that I asked it, but I'm very fascinated by this clinical study you're doing, because it's making me question the thing that Nico said, was that my reflection is there, the thing I'm interested in is how can we make people look at their data less and be more interested in going to maybe a proper professional to assess it in a deeper way?
Absolutely correct question. The other way, the other way around. so this is one coin with two sides. Yeah, absolutely. The people that believe on their smartwatches and trackers. Absolute fascinating question. Yeah.
Thank you.
And there also, just a comment from my side, even if there is not a regulation that says you have to do it some way and you have to include a disclaimer, of course it's in your own free power to add those disclaimers, and in, for example, your product, to add a disclaimer that they should talk to a medical professional?
I think you have some questions now in the chat.
Yeah, I saw that right now. So Joey is asking if there are any specific paragraphs in the MDR that talk about the sandboxes.
No, but MDR, as you are developing a medical device, MDR is required for you. Yeah, and this is the problem in the mindset of a lot of academic research groups, that they say we have such a future technology, there is no rules and standards and norms existing, which is true. What I have said, rules and regulations are written for the past. Once you know a technology, you can write a standard, but you have to adapt the existing one. You can do risk analysis also for future technologies with the principles of ISO 14971. You can do a product qualification or something like this with the principle of supply and material qualification from ISO 13485. So this is how you adapt the good old norms to your future technologies, and this is what makes the difference. There is no excuse, oh, we don't have to follow rules and regulations because we are so future.
Perfect.
Yeah, so I meant the question more in the sense that what you're doing in the sandbox, so the rules or the guidelines that would come, that you'd use for it, then come from the regional authority.
Yes, from the competent authorities. Yes, for DIGA, it's BfArM. Yeah, so there are some rules and requirements defined by German BfArM that are not exactly in the medical device regulation. These are some add-ons, and also Swissmedic for the pilot has defined some additional rules and regulations. So this comes from the competent authorities. Yes.
And once you exit from the sandbox, then you take into account the regulation of the region. Yes. So if you're
exactly that's
into Europe, you would go with the MDR.
Exactly. That's why I have said plan it the right way. Define what you want to learn, have an exit strategy, because the sandbox is limited to different regions, and your learnings must then be implemented in your certification pathway. Do you want to use it in Europe or US or whatever? And what do you have to add to your results gained during your sandbox activities, driven by FDA or MDR or whatever?
It's not that you could ignore what you learn in that phase, for example. Huh?
Nope.
Yeah, has to be in the QMS. Thank you.
Yeah.
Perfect. So another question from Johanna. She has a phased approach with her startups. She first wants to go into a non-medical device navigation platform, and later evolving into a clinical decision support software. And she asks at what point we see it most valuable for a company to engage with a regulatory sandbox. In my opinion, as soon as you have a finished product and you don't play around in the development anymore, it makes sense to test it on actual users to gain clinical data, and then to go into that sandbox model. But Dietmar, maybe you have a different view or have
No,
other.
no, I don't have a different view on this. I just would not phrase it that way, because you're completely right. You must have a kind of a prototype, yeah, where you say, okay, now I want to do the study and gain some results. But of course, you are able to redo your development based on the results you get from your sandbox and activities. Yeah, if there is something that must be implemented, please do it and don't hide away these kind of results. The only thing that I fear is really what I have said at the very first beginning, because a lot of sandbox ideas are not accepted by the competent authorities, you really have to be a novel technology, not something that is me too, yeah. So you really have to show the competent authority you are out of the existing rules, not rules and regulations. You are in the rules and regulations, but maybe not specific guidance or ISO standards or norms or whatever apply. So don't ask for a sandbox permission if you are a kind of a me too. And platform and clinical decision software is, I do not know the intent and purpose from your and not the technology, but this is already a little bit me too. There are a lot of clinical decision software or platforms already on the market. The next question is, you must have really the question mark about the risk classification of your device. And so please prepare very, very precisely why your idea, why your product may apply to be used in a sandbox, because it's really not for everyone. Don't get me wrong. It's really open for products where no boundaries from ISO standards and other norms exist for the moment, and where you would face the risk that regulators would give you a major non-conformity, stop your clinical study. Yeah, if we would not use the sandbox approach at ETH with using non-CE marked devices in a clinical setting, in the clinical anamnese, the ethical committee would stop our clinical study. So these are a little bit the thoughts behind where you have to define and be very, very clear and precise what qualifies you to start the sandbox.
So fitting exactly in this answer, we got another question from Joey. In Germany and Switzerland, how much effort is it to set up the permission from authorities to bring he mentioned a class 2A, but I think in general it's interesting, into this sandbox approach, and what is the maximum time for such a study?
Honestly, I'm not able to answer this because this regulatory sandboxes is a very, very new concept, especially in Switzerland. It's still in a kind of a pilot phase. You really have to argue this with a Swissmedic forth and back, and it took us several months, ETH, to get this defined. The only kind of a sandbox that is written in stone is the DIGA. Yeah, and if you read through the DIGA, there are the DIGA guidelines, and so here you can really read through. The other thing is more in my understanding, but the landscape changes from day to day, very, very vague, and you have to get in contact with the competent authorities. And that's why I said be prepared to get in contact, because competent authorities do not want to give access everyone to a sandbox, because the risk is also at their side. They are sitting in the same boat with all the risks and regulations and opportunities, and if there is a harm for the patient, the competent authority is sitting in the same boat. And so you must be very, very prepared to say to them, hey, that's why we need a regulatory sandbox, and not because we are yet another diabetes diary. Yeah, so you have to see here that it's the only way, or it's the only case where really the competent authorities and the regulators gets your partner and are sitting in the same boat. If something fails, they fail with you, and they don't have they will not be happy to fail.
Thank you very, very much, Dietmar and Nico, and this engaged discussion. Great topic. Thank you so much for the content and for hosting the session. And I wish you a wonderful Thursday afternoon.
Okay, thank you. Don't
Thank you.
forget your homework. Bye-bye.
Bye. Have a good day.